This is the EWN Podcast Network.
Welcome to Late Boomers, our podcast guide to creating your third act with style, power, and impact. Hi, I'm Cathy Worthington.
And I'm Mary Elkins. Join us as we bring you conversations with successful entrepreneurs, entertainers, and people with vision who are making a difference in the world.
Everyone has a story, and we'll take you along for the ride on each interview, recounting the journey our guests have taken to get where they are, inspiring you to create your own path to success. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm Cathy Worthington, welcoming you to a new episode of Late Boomers. I'm here with my co-host, Mary Elkins, and we are so pleased to bring you two guests today, Salim Amin and Chip Duncan, the filmmakers who are bringing us a new phenomenal documentary called Stand Together as One, the famine, the music, the impact. I was privileged to attend the Los Angeles premiere, and the impact was palpable.
And I'm Mary Elkins. Salim Amin is the son of Mohammed Amin, the photojournalist who shot all the footage of the famine in Ethiopia in the 1980s that introduced the crisis there to the rest of the world and started the activism of the British effort Band Aid and the USA for Africa recording of We Are the World and Live Aid. Salim is the founder and chairman of Camera Pix and has delved into the archives and come up with amazing footage of the suffering of the arrival of goods in Ethiopia and the effort to try to help. Chip Duncan has been making documentaries for 35 years in 40 different countries and is the founder of Duncan Entertainment. He's also the author of a book, A Different War. Welcome.
And Salim is coming to us today from his home in Nairobi, and Chip is in the U.S. in Wisconsin. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Great to have you.
How did you guys decide to do this film now? And how did you team up? And why this film right now?
Well, I had the pleasure of meeting Salim about 20 years ago when we began working on a biopic about his father, Mohammed Amin. And I was brought in by some well-known people to help write the screenplay, but also because I have a background that's somewhat similar to Mohammed Amin's as a photojournalist. Why now is a question Salim can answer. He knows it as well as anybody.
I mean, we started this film many years ago with the aim of having it ready for the 40th anniversary. To commemorate the 40th anniversary, because it was such a huge,
We Are the World,
of We Are the World, and of the famine itself as well, because it was such a huge story at the time. We didn't realize that the timing would be so appropriate as it is now, where the world is in a very precarious place. The U.S. is in a mess. Many places in the world are in a mess, and the message of We Are the World and what it brought is more needed now, I think, than even 40 years ago. And so, we are, it's unfortunate that timing has happened, but it's very good for the film to come out at this time to show people what is possible when humanity comes together for a common cause. That those events in 1984, 85 changed the course of history and led to many wonderful things and many people doing amazing things for all sorts of causes over the years. But we seem to have forgotten that part of our humanity, I think, and this is a reminder about that.
Oh, yes. Salim, you're giving me chills, because I so agree with you. Humanity really needs to come together. I have to ask you, though, what was it like growing up as the son of Mohammed Amin, who was one of Africa's most iconic photojournalists? And at what point in your life did you realize you wanted to follow in his footsteps?
I started taking pictures when I was about 8 years or 9 years old. And so I think I got bitten by the bug then. But he was never wanted me to do this, wanted me to get a real job, in quotes. He said, this is not a career that you want to do. But it's all I ever had the passion for. But it was I didn't have enough time with him, unfortunately. He died when he was very young. He was only 52 years old. And, I didn't get enough time to spend with him, and I didn't really appreciate the work that he did and the contribution that he made to the world until, after he was not around, and Chip and I began exploring his life and his archive and the work that he did, and doing our own films, looking at some of those events that he covered over 40 years in Africa. And he made an important contribution, but I feel privileged that I've had the opportunity to continue his legacy and remind people of the work that he did and showcase the work that he did, because it's so important to history that we don't forget some of these events that he covered. Not him in particular, but the events that he covered are very important, especially for Africans to remember their history. And young people on this continent really don't have a clue about what our continent's history is. And I think his content will help remind them of that.
That's good.
True.
And Salim, your father is so known for capturing powerful and sometimes devastating images. So how do you navigate the ethics of visual storytelling today? And how did your father's work shape your view of Africa and your role in telling its stories?
So unfortunately, I never got a chance to see this content until, in only the last sort of 10 years. I mean, I was never taught this content. We were never taught African history in school. Being whether it was in primary school or high school, I never learned Kenyan history, African history. Our history was British history because we were a colony. And so what they taught us in the schools that I went to was, the Tudor kings and Henry VIII, and that was the history that we learned. The Battle of Hastings and things like that. We never did African history, and I really wish I had known what I know now back then, because I think it would have really changed and shaped the way that I looked at this continent and engaged with this continent. But yeah, so I didn't get a chance to really be influenced by his work when I was young. And he, now I'm far more aware of it. And when Chip and I go through the archives, we're always discovering, new things. And it's always, for me, it's mind blowing the number of places that he went and the number of events that he covered in a time when it wasn't easy to get around the continent. There was no mobile phones, there was no internet, there was very little communication, but somehow, he managed to get a lot of content. And while he was best known for his news coverage and some of the very graphic images of genocide and famine and war in Africa, he also published over 75 coffee table books on the beauty of the continent, on the people and the culture and the tribes and the flora and the fauna, because this was his way of balancing the picture. He didn't have the internet, and international media organizations were not interested in positive stories out of Africa. All they ever wanted was the negative stories. So he had no way of telling a balanced picture other than to do these beautiful coffee table books that showcased the beauty of the continent as well as the horrors. The horrors existed. Nobody can deny that they were all there, but there was a whole other side to Africa that nobody ever told or talked about internationally. And so he wanted to balance the picture as best as he could, given the tools that he had at the time. and books was selling. He sold books in their tens of thousands. Coffee table books at a time when people did read. Unfortunately, they've stopped reading as well now. So the books don't get printed anymore. But yeah, that was so for me. It was that balance that was really what motivated me to do the work that we're doing now, is to make sure we tell balanced stories about the continent, and we go and expose the beauty as well as the tragedies.
And was his home base always in Kenya?
Yes, he was born in Kenya and grew up in Tanzania, but then lived in Kenya most of his life.
Can I just throw in too? Yes. As a student of Mo's life and work, he was more than a photographer, much more than a photojournalist. He was, when you look at him through today's microscope and understand the hats that he was wearing, I would say he was an extraordinary producer, not just a photographer, not just a videographer. He was able to build the relationships, the networks, the contacts, to go in and accumulate content all over the continent in a way that a producer would do today. He was also an exceptional editor. He knew what was good, what wasn't good, what was true, what wasn't true. And then the last thing that I think I would celebrate the most about Mohammed Amin, and it's a theme that permeates the documentary Stand Together as One, is he was courageous. He was courageous in the same way that Harry Belafonte and Ken Cragen were courageous when they went into the hot spots that we feature in this particular film in northern Ethiopia. At a time, Mo in particular, when he went in on the first shoot in October of 1983, 84, he was in 1984, October of 84, he was going into the middle of a war zone. And not only was food being used as a weapon, but every other tool of war was being used as well. It was a very dangerous journey. And he and Mike Burke and Mike Woldridge and Claire Birchinger, they were all courageous in a way that we rarely see today, except from frontline journalists. So it's a major part of his personality.
Yeah. Well,
thank you.
Thank you. Chip, about filming, because filming in a way is becoming the book to show everybody what is going on. And people aren't, as you said, Salim, people aren't reading as much anymore. But so your film is a way to show them. It's in a way, it's a huge, big, beautiful book to show what was going on and what could be. And on that note, tell us a bit, Chip, about Stand Together as One and what inspired you to make this documentary. And before you tell us anything, talk about the title and please explain it.
Well, the title, Stand Together as One, is one of the lyrical lines in the song We Are the World. So,
yes,
obviously, We Are the World was taken by the song. So, but conceptually, Stand Together as One is not just referring to the artists who came together in Los Angeles to record the song. Of course, that's the obvious link. But it also refers to the whole notion of how are we as artists, as filmmakers, humanitarians, nurses, doctors, how are we going to help in this particular situation in northern Ethiopia in 1984-85? And the only way to do it was to stand together as one. So if you look at the power of personality, I would say in particular with Harry Belafonte leading this effort, he was able, and to some extent Bob Geldof was able to circumvent government and bring humanitarian relief at a time when these factions were at war. So you can only do that if you have the kind of reputation that Belafonte had at that time. The film itself, one of the hallmarks of this film, and I should preface this by saying a lot of your listeners and viewers have probably seen Lionel Richie's film, The Greatest Night in Pop. That does a wonderful job covering the recording of the song. It does not cover the famine, and it does not cover what happened after the song was recorded. That's what we're calling our prequel and sequel in this film. But we divide the film into three parts: the famine, the music, and the impact. And so it's a very different telling of the story. So you're able to really see what it means, the horror behind using food as a weapon, and how the government of Ethiopia at the time did that in the middle of that civil war. The rebel forces were also accused of it. I don't think anybody comes out clean here. But when you see this compelling footage that Mohammed Amin shot, the video and the stills, and you see the suffering, it's, is it going on today? Yes, we can talk about that. But at the time, these images were unprecedented. Nobody had ever seen anything like it. And the BBC, to their credit, ran a 7-minute nightly news story that changed the history of what journalism does. And so that's the famine. Then the music obviously it's not just We Are the World, it's also Band Aid and Live Aid. And then Act 3 of the film really covers what happened to the money. And you see the extraordinary efforts of USA for Africa and how they were able to change the course of history at the time, but also continue to do extraordinary work on the continent today.
Yes, today, which is so impressive. So many people don't understand that getting all the supplies and the money and food there is very difficult to do. And as you mentioned, Belafonte could go in because he was a world leader in his fame and was able to make it happen, along with Ken Cragen and Bob Geldof and the others.
Yeah. I want to ask
your father, Salim.
I want to ask Chip and Salim to answer what was your main goal with this project? Were there any specific issues you hope to raise awareness about? You could just take turns on that one.
I'll just say that there were really two things driving it. One is the power of the story itself. This is a narrative that we really haven't seen before. It's not only in the 3-act structure, but we just rarely see and rarely have the visual support to show what heroism is and what these people were all able to achieve. When you look at Claire Birchinger, the nurse who was working with the International Red Cross at the time, this is the greatest humanitarian I've ever met. It's pure service. I mean, it's the kind of thing, and it's not tied to any kind of religious perspective. It's a human being making a choice to help others in a time of need. I think that's a really compelling part. And the part I'll throw back to Salim is you also see the transition, I would say, in character of our main character, Mohammed Amin. You see what the impact of the famine on him, how he changed as an individual and was able to elevate his own kind of empathy and compassion and need to serve. Salim, maybe you could talk more about that.
I mean, it's not so much on him. I think in general, just highlighting the importance of good journalism, which is severely lacking in the world at the moment, where media is really not doing its job. It's not performing the service that it's meant to perform to keep people informed in an objective, unbiased way. It's all been compromised in the last decade or so. So I think trying to go back to good journalism and the impact it can have in society and in the world, and then artists, the power that artists have to actually make a difference, and understanding their own capacity to make a difference and a huge difference in the world. And I think artists today are not doing enough to change things. I think, again, they have become compromised. I think they're chasing the money. That's all they're doing. Whereas the heart and the passion of the artists in 1984 that recorded those songs, both Do They Know It's Christmas and We Are the World, I think that compassion and that heart was they didn't even understand how powerful their voice was going to be, but they all showed up. they all turned up because they had huge respect for Ken, for Harry, for Quincy, for Lionel, for Michael. They had huge respect when the phone rang and they picked up the call. They didn't even ask, why are we doing this? They were just said, listen, guys, we're putting something together. Come, just be there. And they came because of the feelings of that. And I don't know if that would ever happen again today. And also the importance of, USA for Africa was never supposed to be around for more than 4 or 5 years. It was supposed to be for famine relief, to do things. But 40 years later, it's still going and it's still doing things on the continent. It's simply because the song is still generating revenue, which is, to me, is still incredible that 40 years later, the $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year is still generated by We Are the World from downloads. It's mind blowing that a song has that much impact, and all credit to the USA for Africa board and Marcia Thomas that they have kept finding projects in Africa and other parts of the world, even within the US. Doing things, following up with the Hands Across America project and helping with homelessness and poverty in the U.S. and other places. They've kept going, and that to me is it's a real lesson for what we need now. So those were the reasons for making. We didn't realize the world, like I said earlier, the world would be in such a bad place by the time the film came out. But those were some of the motivating factors, was to tell these stories, to give people hope. And remember, COVID came in between our production on this. So again, COVID changed the mindset of a lot of people, and a lot of people lost hope. And we would hope that this film would give that back to people, to know that each individual can make a difference. You don't have to go and save 1 million lives, but you can be a better person to your family, to your community, to the people around you, and you can make a difference that way. And I think we've lost a little bit of that compassion.
And I'll throw out one thing. We haven't necessarily explained this, but the proceeds from the song We Are the World, everybody worked nonprofit. The proceeds from that song helped create the nonprofit called USA for Africa, which is who we're talking about here. And when Salim says, they thought they'd be around 4 or 5 years, they're still going strong. Part of what they did, and I think this is extraordinary, is the way they chose to give away money on the continent was to empower nonprofits on the continent. It's not like the typical NGO where they're coming in after an earthquake or a fire or a civil war. Literally, they look for grassroots organizations on the continent and help bring the financial resources to them that they need for empowerment of women and girls, for literacy, for food security. And that was revolutionary as well. So the blueprint that we talk about in this film really is journalists, healthcare workers, and then how the nonprofits, the musicians, of course, how those nonprofits work after they've got the money in their hands. It's one of the most successful organizations around the world in terms of truly empowering people in one particular.
Yeah, and I also wanted to tell our listeners that my husband was Ken Cragen. He's passed away now, but he's the one that made all the phone calls to pull the artists together for We Are the World. And yes, when they started the board, and he's on the board, and years go by, and they kept trying to disband the board, more money came in. And so they just kept it going. And he was on the board when he passed away, and the board is still a strong entity that really cares what they fund and who they fund. And it became a whole second career that he had to assimilate into his life. It was really amazing. Salim, what were the challenges and obstacles in making this documentary?
Oh, I think Chip probably be better answer that. One was finance.
Okay.
I mean, but I'll take a stab at it. One was obviously finance. We financed this whole thing ourselves. We were hoping to get financing from various entities, and it didn't happen. COVID interfered with it. We were in the middle of production when COVID happened. That went through. The Greatest Night of Pop came out, and that everyone assumed that that's the same story, and So why would they want to give to another story, not understanding the difference between the two documentaries? And so that was a challenge. Then also getting hold of all these people. I mean, Chip spent, months looking for Claire, and Claire Bertschinger turns out to be really the one of the centerpieces, not the centerpiece of the film. But finding her and getting her to agree to talk was, months of work on Chip's part. Getting Harry's last interview, getting Ken's last interview. Those were just, we were lucky to get those because we happened to be in the right place at the right time, and they both agreed. They both agreed to do it, I think, simply because of the friendship that they had with my father, and that was the reason that they agreed to sit down with us. Harry was, very elderly, very not very well when he gave that interview, was very reluctant to do that, but I think just did it as a favor because of his memories of my dad and the time they spent together. Ken was really not well when we did that interview. He was in, his back was giving him a lot of problems. He was in a lot of pain that day. Kathy, you'll remember when we came for the 35th anniversary.
35th anniversary of We Are the World.
Of We Are the World, yeah. So he was in a lot of pain, but he like a trooper, he sat through that whole interview for, I think it was almost an hour that we were interviewing him in that theater at A&M Studios, and again, I think a lot of it had to do with with the fact that they'd all been in Ethiopia with my dad. They'd all traveled together. They'd all spent time together, and they'd stayed in touch. Until Dad passed away. I got lovely notes from Harry, from Ken, from everybody when he passed away in the hijack, in the plane crash, and I think it was just that was a lot of goodwill went into making this film. But it's still financially, has almost bankrupted both of us in making this film. So we hope at some point we'll recover something. But if we can, use it to help people do better things, then that's reward enough as well.
And I would I'm going to actually do something that's probably a little less typical on a podcast like this, but I'd like to ask both of you, Cathy and Merry, for your impressions of Dame Claire Bertschinger, the nurse that we're talking about, and the reason being that she never sought any publicity. This, for the listeners and viewers, when the BBC crew arrived on the fields of Coram and in the city of Mekelle to document this famine, the one person that was providing healthcare for hundreds of thousands of people was a nurse for the International Red Cross. And she has never sought any attention whatsoever. But to me, she's the soul of the film. And I just wondered what you guys thought when you saw the film in terms of Claire and what she brings to the production.
Yeah, first of all, I think you mentioned it, Salim, or perhaps you did, Chip. Her life was service. She was there. And I think the most gratification that she had in her life was the fact that she could make a difference to help all of these people and to try to make sure that the people that she was able to feed and help in their medical care, try to assure that they would go on and survive. And I know you had a man in the film who was a survivor, and I don't know if it was because of her help and service, but I was very impressed with that and her dedication. And also the fact that she said that they had to choose the people there because there were so many people who were starving and ill, and talking about what a choice to have to make in life, to choose people that would live and die. That was powerful. And it's frightening to think that that may still be going on today. And I was very impressed with her because of her dedication and love for the people and the country and justice.
Well, having lived through Ken going over there And going with the supplies and telling me what it was like was I didn't have any footage like that to look at. I never knew about Claire. I'm not sure whether Ken met Claire, but he probably did. I just was so shocked that one person could do that much. I'll start crying. But I was just really, really shocked and flabbergasted that she's by herself, helping people, trying to put food in babies, trying to just decide, is this one, can we give this one the food, or is the other one worse off? Is the one we have to feed the one that's better because they can get better? It was just like life decisions that she was having to make every minute of every day, and doing it month after month after month. How long was she there, Chip? I did miss that piece.
She was there over more than 2 years. I'll tell you, this is a stunning. I mean, when we interviewed her, I knew a lot about her, but this woman came to northern Ethiopia with very little experience on the continent from 2 years as a nurse for the International Red Cross in Lebanon during their Lebanese Civil War, 82, 83. So she went from one war zone to another. And when she left Ethiopia, she went to Afghanistan. Oh. So the arc of her career, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe she's the first nurse who's been more or less knighted by the crown in England. She's Dame Claire Berchinger. And it's so compelling to me that the country finally recognized what I consider some of the greatest traits that any human can have, which is to put your own needs. You know, obviously you have to sustain yourself through food and water and sleep, but to put her needs to the side to be able to help all of these people for as long as she did, and not just in Ethiopia.
And how amazing is it that she's still alive on the planet? Yes. Being in these war zones, completely amazing that she survived.
And never
but like Michael Biggs said, to make those choices, what you said, Mary, to make those choices at the age of only 23, 24 years old, to have to decide who lives and who dies, it's not something that anyone should ever have to do. And not just for a day, but to do it for a period of 2 years, or maybe more in different war zones, it's not acceptable. I mean, it's something that the world, we never should have to put people in that situation.
Never.
But again, nothing has changed. Unfortunately, nothing in the world has changed. If anything, it's even worse. If you look at what's happening in Gaza now, you look at Ukraine, you look at Sudan, you look at northern Ethiopia. It's all happening again, and we just don't seem to learn.
So you asked earlier, and I think it's important that the timing of this film, and Salim mentioned, probably more timely than we could have imagined. But part of it is we're inundated with, especially in the United States right now, with things like Elon Musk with a chainsaw cutting indiscriminately. And the antithesis of that, the counterpoint to that, is Claire Berchinger, Harry Belafonte, Ken Cregan, the artist Bob Geldof, who are saying, I'm here to help. I'm not here to cut. I'm not here to take away. The empathy that comes through in this film, the need for compassion and the importance of it, I think is what's really driving this production. And that's why when it hits people in these big group environments, and they want to, it's the kind of film when you're done watching it, you want to talk about it. And you want to say, what can I do in my community, with my family, with my friends? Is it working with the Boys and Girls Club or the food pantry, or helping teach someone to read, or Humane Society? Everybody has within them the possibility of finding a niche where they can volunteer and they can be of service and they can help. And you can do it through your mosque, your church, your synagogue, or just, if you're not religious, do it the way you want to do it. And Claire just embodies that. And I think Harry did too. I mean, Harry, his whole life was like that. And Ken, when he went from this to Hands Across America, and they understood the importance of, number one, food. clean water, reproductive rights, all of the different things that each of us need, civil rights, human rights, it's all in the film.
Mm.
It all comes through.
That's the question I asked myself after I saw the film. What can I do? What can I do, even just for a little niche somewhere, to make the world a little bit of a better place? And on that note, Chip, as far as all the people who were in the film, how did you get the rights clearances for the songs and the footage? Was it difficult, like finding Claire? How did you find Claire and getting the rights? And how did you also, as far as making the film, how did you and Salim divide up the tasks that were involved?
Well, the rights are an interesting issue. So USA for Africa owns the recording and the behind-the-scenes footage and all of the different aspects of We Are the World. So they're not our partner in the production, but they've been our collaborators from the get-go. And so we knew we had clearances for all of the We Are the World material at the time we started the production. We did not know what amount of material we would use from Live Aid or Band Aid until we started editing the film. And they've been delightful to work with. They understand the same importance that we do, which is, like Salim mentioned, that we didn't get paid to make the film. We're making it and marketing it in the same spirit that Bob Geldof did and the We Are the World team did. Mm-hmm. But with the Live Aid, Band Aid Charitable Trust, we've worked out a deal with them where if there is revenue, a percentage of it goes back to them for their ongoing work on the continent as well.
Yeah, because you had some amazing Live Aid footage.
Yeah.
You've got Queen and you've got...
everybody's in it for just a matter of seconds, but it is a who's who. So you realize the importance of Live Aid is without question the greatest concert in history. I mean, literally 40% of the world watched some part of that concert on broadcast television. It was way before streaming or platforms.
Yeah, right.
But then, of course, the footage we use the most, which is both the famine and then the food distribution that comes after these musical efforts, is from camera picks. It's material that Salim's father, Mohammed Amin, created. His colleagues were there. They helped create it. There's, the sound engineer, Abdul Ramadan, other colleagues, Duncan Willits. All of that camera picks team played a role here and continues to this day. So, I was sitting in the Midwest working on the editing, but I'd be on the phone with Salim saying, "Hey, do you guys have pictures of the graveyards on the Koran Plateau? Do you have footage of Harry and Ken distributing food, a year later?" All of that was back and forth. And Camera Pic's archive is truly, other than the Duncan Group archive, I mean, it's one of the finest archives in the world. Both Salim and I work really hard on maintaining our archives and making them preserving for history, but also making them digitally friendly and available. So Mo's work is the film would not exist without Mo's incredible coverage of these events.
And I was so surprised and happy to see that footage of them arriving in Africa, because that's something that hasn't been shown, that I've never seen. And it is stuff that Mo Amin shot, and I didn't even know that still existed. It's very exciting to see my husband with Harry Belafonte and Bob Geldof walking into the crowds in Ethiopia. I mean, very moving.
Very. It was.
And I think it's interesting because in audience responses, it's almost to be expected that some percentage of an audience will shed a tear or several tears watching the first act, because you're seeing, it's almost as if, and I think this is an apt comparison, it's as if there were cameras inside the Holocaust. This is that kind of event. More than 1 million people starved to death.
Yeah,
and Mo
I had that thought.
Mo was able to capture that in a way that is so heartbreaking when you see it. But almost everybody, including me, when I was editing, when the real tears come when the food arrives.
And Chapter 3.
when you see when Claire is at the little tiny airport and points out the airplane coming, those sorts of things are so emotionally moving. And all of that is because of Camera Pix having that footage and shooting that footage. So like you, Cathy, when I saw, Ken and Harry are walking in the crowds in Tigray province, it's unbelievable that footage exists.
Even the press conferences and, doing the stuff in Ethiopia, the press conferences, I didn't know we had it until we started searching through the tapes and viewing everything. And then, you asked about challenges earlier. One of them was restoring all of this archive, which was all done in Milwaukee with Chip, was restoring this content, which is 40 years old now and shot on tape. And, getting all the glitches. Some of the footage was not completely, we weren't able to completely restore it, and you can see, the tearing in the screen and stuff. But I think in some way it adds to the authenticity of it. But we did try and repair it as best as we could, so that it was usable. But that was also, we also discovered a lot of new content when we were working on this film.
That must have been stunning for you, Salim, just to see what your father did that you'd never seen before.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, we seem to, in this archive, we have, 8 million images and 22,000 hours of footage. So we're still discovering every time we go into it, we still find new things that we had no idea existed because it's not all digital. And so we're still going through the physical negatives and slides and tapes and film reels, even 16 mil film reels. And we don't know what's on them until we clean them and view them, and there's incredible material there. So hopefully we'll be able to make many more films together on some of these important historical events.
They are.
Yes.
Important.
And Salim, whom do you want most to see this film? And what is the message you want them to take away?
Well, I think, I'll speak for Chip on this as well, is that we want as many people as possible to see this. There's obviously an audience that remembers Live Aid, remembers We Are the World and the recording, and remembers the famine. And for them, it's nostalgia. It's going back and looking and reliving some of those events. But there is two generations that probably have no idea that these events ever took place, or they might know the song We Are the World, but they have no idea of the origins of the song and why it was recorded and what made it happen and who were the people that put it all together. And that's very important, we think, for them to see this film and to understand how that generation, our generation, made a difference, such a huge difference at that time. So universities, schools, pretty much any audience, I think it's important anywhere in the world, not just Americans, but Europeans, but Africans. They need to see this film because everybody was a part of this movement in the 1980s. There wasn't any part of the world that wasn't affected by what happened, and every one of them had their own versions of We Are the World, or Do They Know It's Christmas? There was a Canadian song, there was a German song, there was a Dutch song. Everybody copied what was done by USA for Africa to contribute something. And Marcia was telling us that to date, the largest contributions to the song come from Japan. Japan seems to love this song, and that's where the majority of the downloads happen. The majority of the money comes from to this day. So this was truly a global event, and it seems, unfortunately, with technology, which should make things like this much more global, it seems to be the opposite. It seems the more information we have, and the more access to information we have, the more misinformed or uninformed we are than we were 40 years ago. And that's, to me, that's a tragedy, because I think young people have the ability, they have too much choice now. So they have the ability to filter their information. They have they can put their own algorithms, so they only receive what they want to receive, whether it's music, or sports. They don't really want to know about a civil war in Sudan or about the devastation in Ukraine. Young people, majority of them are not interested in this. But in the 1980s, and I'm old enough to remember that, and you guys are just slightly younger than me. But you'll remember that in America there was 3 channels. There was ABC, there was NBC, there was CBS. You are either a Brokaw fan, a Rather fan, or a Peter Jennings fan, and you watched your favorite broadcaster at 6 p.m. and you watched the news, and the whole family sat together and watched the news, and whether you liked it or not, you had to watch your 20 minutes of local news and your 10 minutes of international news, and you had to know. And then people had dinner afterwards and they discussed the news and what was going on. And so young people were so much better informed than they are now, because now they're all doing their own things. Nobody sits down at dinner together anymore. They're all on their own devices, watching their own things, doing their own things. That culture has gone and it's never going to come back. But I think we're poorer for it as a society. Trying to get people to remember and understand the importance of coming together as one, and is very important for this film. Is the important message from this film.
And hopefully the film breaks through for all audiences, because you have the music and you have the times and you have the emotional impact that would affect everybody. And I have to ask Chip, I know that we were just discussing editing, the editing involved, but was there anything in the film that you had to cut that you wish you could have kept in?
That's an interesting question. I would say no. And the reason being that if we were constrained by budget, obviously, but also, we stayed on task. I mean, the 3-act structure that we outlined at the beginning, I think, is a big part of it. We knew that we were going to come up against dollars if we tried to exploit Live Aid in any more significant way. We also knew that Lionel's film came out before ours, The Greatest Night in Pop, and we were very well set on not covering the same ground. So it's a lovely film. Hats off to that production, but we didn't want to have to redo the same thing or retell the same stories. I think the power of journalism and the power of service really come through strongly in the way that we created it. And as much as we use the Camera Picks archive fully, we probably, I would say we covered it as exhaustively as we could. If there was anything that I wish we could add, it would have been, which was mostly a budget consideration, it would have been to cover more of the programs of USA for Africa on the continent. We didn't have the resources to do it. But when I was talking earlier about their approach to giving, I've been on a lot of nonprofit boards, and I love what they've been able to do. I've been on a board in Nicaragua called the Roberto Clemente Health Clinic. They're very similar. The money is generated here, but it's facilitated without overhead directly to Nicaragua in that case, or in this case, Ethiopia. So it's a rare thing, I think, to see a nonprofit operate that way. But if anything, I would have added more about USA for Africa if we'd been able to.
Yeah, we would have gone to travel to some of these countries that we weren't able to go through on the continent and actually film a lot more of the programs and interview a lot more of the people who have benefited from 40 years of USA for Africa's generosity with these programs.
That might be another film, a very interesting extra film.
I will say too, because I've worked quite a bit in Ukraine as a photojournalist, and Afghanistan and Sudan. One of the things that you see a lot of media cover is the specifically the death and destruction the crumbled buildings, the corpses lying under rubble, those sorts of things. And I think this film, in part, will succeed because we show acts of kindness, we show acts of empathy, we show acts of compassion. We're trying to make sure that we come away with a different narrative. And in that regard, I want to mention specifically for your listeners or viewers that while we're recording this, Sudan is going through one of the worst atrocities on earth and is getting almost no media coverage because it's a civil war. It's not that journalists are unwilling or in any way afraid to go in and document it. They're simply being held at bay. You can't get in to do the coverage. But we know that about 20 million people are struggling with food security in Sudan right now, as we're recording this. And so the death toll from starvation in that country may far surpass what we saw in Ethiopia. It's hard to say. But the challenges remain. And it ultimately comes down to will and really, Salim was talking about young people, but it comes down to teaching. If you don't have empathy within you, if you don't feel compassion within you, then it's up to all of us to say, let's reinvent that wheel and make sure that people understand the power and the importance of those emotions and those gestures so that people can really help each other. I mean, we know who gets the media spotlight in the United States, and neither of the two main players right now, or three or four or five, or you name it, their message is the opposite of this film. And this film is really, it really works hard to show what's possible when we stand together as one.
Mm-hmm. And the theme of unity is central to the film. And Salim, what do you think the film says about the importance of community in today's world?
I think it can't be said more aggressively than in the film that, as a community, as individuals, we can do only so little. But when we all get together and we combine the talents of so many different sectors of society to come together and do something, you can change history. I mean, little children in 1985 raised close to $50 million. Children under the age of 10, because they saw this footage and they told their parents that, don't give us pocket money for the next 6 months. We'll go and do bake sales and lemonade sales and do this, and we'll go and raise money because these children are dying in Ethiopia, because they watched that footage. They saw that, and those children had empathy and a sense of responsibility that they had to do something. We all have it in us. We all, I think, fundamentally are good people. I would like to believe that we are. Deep down, we're all good people. It's just we seem to have lost our way. And COVID, I thought, would bring people, together more, would give a sense of empathy and community. But I think it was the opposite almost. We realized we became more selfish and more self-centered, and realized we could actually live without each other and survive. And I think we lost a lot in COVID that we need to get back. And hopefully films like this can rebuild that sense of community and solidarity. And, like in Los Angeles, when the fires happened, communities came together to help each other, to, people who had lost their homes or their things that were taken in, they were looked after. Communities came together because you have that sense of wanting to help and wanting to do something. But yet in conflicts like Sudan, like Chip mentioned, people don't care because they don't know. In conflicts like Ukraine, where they do know, or in Gaza, where they do know, they still don't care. Because, again, these are maybe people of a different color, or of a different religion, or of a different, society. And I think in 1984, 85, this wasn't the case. We weren't as divided as a world. As a world, we were not divided like we are today. Unfortunately, due to politicians mainly, not for, politicians have succeeded in dividing us. But in the 1984-85, people did not look at your religion and your color and your faith and your geographic location. It was simply, why don't these people have food when we have everything here? Why don't people have the basics? And that shocked people. Also, the 1980s were a time of great prosperity in the world, and now it's not a time of great prosperity. People are struggling everywhere in the world to make ends meet. So the troubles of people on the other side of the world are not so important anymore, because everybody has their own struggles that they're trying to deal with, to put food on their table. So perhaps it's more difficult to find empathy when you have your own challenges. And I think this is, again, sadly, what society has, what has become of the world post-COVID and post this political splitting of people.
Well, it sounds to me that what you were trying to achieve in this film is to create that empathy again. And I mean, in seeing your film, I'm certainly impacted by that, and I think it will influence people. I have to ask you both, though, on the film side, were there any unexpected moments or revelations during filming that made you rethink what you thought you knew about the subjects and the whole issue of what occurred there? Can you both take a stab at this?
I mean, as I said earlier, just finding some of that footage and seeing some, Harry and Ken and others, in Ethiopia and having that. I didn't know we had it. So, discovering some of that footage again was quite a revelation in that way. Harry's interview was quite amazing, because he struggled. He was kind of going all over the place a little bit, but he told us some fascinating stories about life and things that he had done that nothing related to Ethiopia, but just some really interesting things. It was Chip, about 3 hours, that interview, 3.5 hours. So there was a lot of really interesting stuff in there. And I mean, Marcia was quite a revelation in the film. I mean, she comes across really well. She really explained a lot of things very, very well. And Claire, as we've said, is sort of the unexplored.
Marcia. Yes.
Marcia Thomas is the executive director of USA for Africa, and has been for the last, I think, probably 35 years now. She wasn't there right at the beginning, but she joined shortly after the song was released, and has become a huge part of that movement and the organization. And at this age, she's now in her late 70s. Now she still goes to the continent half a dozen times a year to go and see the projects and oversee it. So, learning about this stuff, all of this really was very interesting to me. And even though I knew the story very well, I didn't know it that well. I found out a lot of things that I didn't know before making the film.
I like your question, Mary, and I'm going to answer it a little differently. Not so much about the narrative itself, but rather the way media and distribution happens for television today is it's counter to the film that we made. And by that, I mean, if when we were pitching this project, and it didn't matter who we were talking to. So let's say you're at Apple, you're at Oprah, you're at Obama's company, wherever you are pitching this, Netflix. If you go in with this project, what you're essentially saying is, we want to do a film about great acts of philanthropy, where artists come together and successfully go help people. That is not a good pitch for this media environment. If you're looking for a good pitch, you're talking about The Last of Us or The Walking Dead or Game of Thrones, or none of those are anything like this film. And so what we don't have is the big media support, the machine that you see with the networks, with from Disney percolating down or Netflix percolating down, because it's like, okay, you think about the story of We Are the World. Well, you got Harry Belafonte calls Ken Cragen, and then they bring in Quincy Michael and Lionel, and they generate $100 million to go help feed people. That's not the drama that the networks are looking for. And so, are they willing to put money into that kind of story? The answer we found out is no. But in fact, what the world really needs are stories about people like Claire Berchinger or like Belafonte or like, and you can do the story of Mohammed Amin because he's so versatile. It's an episodic tale, but it's like he is in the thick of Black Hawk Down and Idi Amin and, Emperor Bukasa, and he's in the thick of it as a journalist. But this film, it flies in the face of the media environment in which we live in. And so for me, that was probably the big surprise. Oh, you want to tell a story about successful, generous, empathetic people? It's like, no, it's kind of contrary to the media environment. So that was
well, I have to say, when you win your Oscar for it, I think a lot of people will want to air it.
From your lips to God's ears.
But that, Chip, what you described is a very unpleasant surprise. It's not at all what you thought you would be hit with, an unpleasant surprise like that. And we've touched on this quite... Oh, sorry.
They like celebrity, so we had that. We did have celebrity, but it's not kind of, good news story that you would typically see. It is inspiring, though.
Yes. And we touched on this quite a bit already, so we can maybe gloss over this question that I had. But Salim, you were very young when your father, the late, great Mo Amin, was out there shooting the famous footage of the famine and a lot of war footage. So how do you feel this impacted you? Do you feel you've covered that already?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was not aware of the significance of the work that he did at that age. I was a teenager and, really had more important things on my mind, like partying and, what else to, rather than, realizing what he was doing. And it was always like, he helped make We Are the World and Do They Know It's Christmas? But I didn't really understand the importance of that work until after he died, to be honest. It's when I started, going into his life a lot more, when I made the documentary Mo and Me on his life, that's when I started understanding the impact of what he did and the impact of the archive that we have so he was significant. He was a significant person in the history of this continent. But often, but it's been 30 years since he died, so people forget. And we try and keep that memory going, but people do forget and people move on these days. I mean, it's you're lucky if you get not even 15 seconds of fame. You're lucky if you get 3 seconds of fame when you go, and so, the fact that people still do remember him on this continent 30 years later is it's a nice thing. It's nice. It's heartwarming that people do remember the work that he contributed. And I hope that this film will bring it back up again.
I'll add to that by just saying that both Geldof and Mohammed Amin are household names in Ethiopia. So there's somewhere north of 60 million people in that country, headed towards 100 million. That they know who these guys are, and Salim and I have experienced this personally. If ever in doubt, you go to Washington, D.C., and you will never pay for a cab ride if your driver happens to be Ethiopian, because the minute you bring up Mohammed Amin, everybody knows who Mohammed Amin is in Ethiopia and in Kenya. I mean, both.
So gratifying.
He's credited with saving millions of lives. That footage, I mean, if you think about it, here's something your listeners and viewers will relate to. If there had not been a camera photographing George Floyd, that story would not have taken on the power that it did and changed, the whole Black Lives Matter movement here in the United States. It all traces back. And then you look at the same thing in the continent. Mo's footage saved millions of lives. And you can't dispute that.
Just the impact of that statement. It's powerful. The film, in relation to what Cathy asked you, Salim, you must have been emotionally impacted, and you must still be every time you see this footage or discover new footage. And also on the same note, Chip, just working on standing together as one must have changed your, I wanted to get that right. It must have changed your personal view on social activism and social issues. Did it not?
Well, for me personally, I've worked as a photojournalist in a number of these very similar places, and covered with Salim northern Ethiopia, a number of times. But I've also worked on a lot of humanitarian projects around the world. So this has been, for me personally, the film is very much in sync with the mission of our company, and very much in sync with, the kinds of films and books that I set out to write 40 years ago when we started the company. So I think it represents, in a way, it's like a pinnacle of what I think is important. It's a visualization of, I'm just talking about our own work here, but the kinds of things that we've done in Colombia, Nicaragua, Ghana, Ethiopia, Myanmar. It's very much in sync with who we are and what we do. So I really love seeing this story about Mo and Ken and Harry come out and change, Claire, all of them. It's so important for people to see what's possible and then participate.
Yes, what's possible.
Yeah, and we thank you so much for this. Is there anything else either of you would like to share with our audience that we haven't touched on yet?
I think you guys have covered pretty much everything. I mean, what the obvious question is, where can people see the film, and where how is it out? And as Chip has touched on, we're working on the distribution side of it. We're working with a distributor to get it out there. There is going to be private screenings and university screenings happening, for the rest of this year. Film festivals as well. It's just premiered at the Milwaukee Film Festival this last week. And there's one more screening, I think, on the 7th of May in Milwaukee as well. So there will be other festivals. We hope to come to Newport Beach, is it, Chip, in October? We'll be at Newport Beach, or the film will be there. I don't know if we'll be there, but the film will be there. And so we're hoping that people will be able to catch it. And if we can get it on, we're hoping that it'll be on public TV as well in the fall in the US. So we'll hopefully have it on public TV so that millions of people can look at it and hopefully be moved and inspired by it as well.
And I'll add a final thought. I think we're all aware of and seen images like a man with a chainsaw trying to cut federal programs, and in particular USAID. When USAID goes away, literally millions of people on the continent now no longer have the resources they need through the PEPFAR program. So, if you're HIV positive, if you have nutrition issues, you name it, all of that changes. But I want to maybe from a personal perspective close with a story from a screening I did of the film in Budapest in January. So I spoke and screened the film downtown Budapest. And usually when you're done with the screening, there's a handful of people that want to come up and talk about their own experiences or, give you feedback on the film. And after 2 or 3 people were in line, and finally a guy walks up he was the last guy in line. He walks up and he was in, I would say, his early 50s, and he had a very dour look on his face. And I looked at him and I thought, is this going to punch me out? I mean, what's going on? And I said, how can I help you? And he said, well, I just want to tell you, because obviously you know how to make a film and it's very powerful. And I really wish I hadn't seen it. And I paused and I said, okay. And he said, because now I have to do something. Uh-huh. And this is almost verbatim of our conversation. And then, of course, we got into what that means and how he interacts in the city of Budapest, et cetera. But he admitted to me that he had never helped anyone. I mean, he literally said those words. And I thought, hey, if this film inspires you to do something, whatever that might be, and the examples are many of things that we can all do, then we served our purpose. And it's, I've told that story in front of audiences, and he, I'm sure, has gone on to do things to help other people.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Beautiful way to sum up. Thank you both. It's been really exciting to talk to both of you. Our guests on Late Boomers today have been Salim Amin and Chip Duncan, the filmmakers with a new documentary called Stand Together as One, The Famine, the Music, the Impact. It's been a great privilege to have both of you here. Thank you.
Oh, we've had a great time. Thank you both.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. And thank you to our listeners for listening to our Late Boomers podcast and subscribing to our Late Boomers podcast channel on YouTube. And listen in next week when you'll meet life coach Patty Smith. You can listen on any podcast platform, and we do appreciate you. Please follow us on Instagram at I am Cathy Worthington and at I am Mary Elkins and at Late Boomers. Thanks again so very much, Salim Amin and Chip Duncan.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for joining us on Late Boomers, the podcast that is your guide to creating a third act with style, power, and impact. Please visit our website and get in touch with us at lateboomers.biz. If you would like to listen to or download other episodes of Late Boomers, go to ewnpodcastnetwork.com.
This podcast is also available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and most other major podcast sites. We hope you make use of the wisdom you've gained here and that you enjoy a successful third act with your own style, power, and impact.